want you to take a good look at these pictures. I'm going to introduce you here to Dr. Nahid Dossani as he heads out to help the homeless. He's behind the only palliative care program for the homeless in Toronto, the 5,000 people in Toronto who have no one to look after them, nowhere to go. He provides end-of-life care for them in a program called PEACH, Palliative Education and Care for the Homeless. And our colleague Cass Rusey is going to be reporting on this today. But we wanted to introduce you, before you hear some of Cass's other reporting, to Dr. Dossani. So look who's with me in the studio. It's a pleasure to have you in.
Thank you for having me.
And to find out a little bit more what you're doing through PEACH. I love that name, PEACH, because it sounds, like you're bringing cheer where it's so badly needed. You set up this program in 2014. What did you perceive or observe that the need that was there that had to be addressed?
For me, the journey really began when I met a patient named Terry when I was a resident physician training at the University of Toronto. I was working in a large shelter for homeless men, and he presented in pain crisis. He had a huge head and neck cancer. As I got to know him, I realized when he was diagnosed over a year ago, he was lost to follow-up due to mental health issues, but he started to have pain. So he did what any individual would do. He went hospital to hospital, ER to ER, walk-in clinic to walk-in clinic, seeking the kind of pain control that anybody should have access to. When I met him, he didn't really trust me because unfortunately he was denied access to pain control in those settings. I remember going into the shelter one day, 2 days later after meeting him, so excited to help him, but I couldn't find him anywhere. Unfortunately, his body was found in the early hours of the morning by a commuter on her way to work. It was too little, too late. He had overdosed on a combination of alcohol and street drugs. For me, this was a traumatic event. I started to realize it wasn't just a Terry story, it wasn't just a Toronto story, it was a national and international story that affected the lives of thousands around the world.
So you responded with your program to help people like Terry. And as I said, there are 5,000 souls like that in just Toronto.
Right.
So the program itself, you go out and you go to them. And tell me about the care you provide.
Yeah. PEACH is a program of the Inner City Health Associates. We're a group of over 60 healthcare providers working in over 40 shelter and street-based settings in the city of Toronto. PEACH is a mobile outreach palliative care program that meets patients wherever they're at, under bridges, on the streets, in shelters, so that no person with a life-limiting diagnosis falls through the cracks. It's really foundationally based on the idea of building relationships, for example, with our regional home care program, so that we can deliver home palliative care for the homeless and vulnerably housed.
And there's your car. It's probably got a lot of clicks on it. They call it the Peachmobile, don't they? Everyone loves it because you go to them, no barriers. You go to where they are. Now, you mentioned Terry. I want to play a little bit of tape here to introduce people watching to Mickey, who's one of the men that you're looking after right now. Let's listen to Mickey.
Oh yeah, that's for sure every day, because that pink one is my FC pill.
Yeah. What about the rest though?
Well, the yellow one is I have GERD.
Yeah, but there's 2 water pills in here.
Yeah, there's no, one is a water pill and one is a blood pressure pill.
So you've gone to find Mickey, not just in the street, but you've tracked him down, obviously, to some sort of healthcare facility. Tell me a little bit about him and I guess how typical he is.
Yeah, in this clip, you see a gentleman who is 63 years old, who's lived a very difficult life due to mental health issues, addictions issues, and now is dealing with the life-limiting diagnosis of end-stage liver disease. There's a lot of issues here. Of course, quality of life, pain, nausea, physical symptoms, but emotional symptoms, social isolation, dignity, a loss of independence. And unfortunately, Mickey represents what we see as a growing population in Toronto and in Canada. The average life expectancy of a homeless individual in a city like Toronto is 34 to 47 years old. Meanwhile, average Canadians live for 77 to 82 years. The mortality rates are 2.3 to 4 times higher than the average Canadian population. This is a very sick population, and Mickey's an example of this, unfortunately.
These are people who have nothing, no one to care for them, nowhere to go. What does your care mean to them?
I think what it means to them is meeting them where they're at. We often hear the idea that health providers don't always see us for who we are and what we're going through. By meeting people's mental health needs, their social needs, sometimes their spiritual needs, we're truly able to provide care in the places they are at. 90% of Canadians want to die at home. And we find that the majority of homeless and vulnerably housed individuals are not that different in that opinion. It's just what they call home is different.
Right.
So by flipping the model on its head, we're able to support them right there, in Mickey's case, in a shelter-based setting.
I can understand what it would be like to have someone like you show an interest if
Thank
you
you.
were Mickey, but I can hear the passion in your voice as you talk
Thank you,
about
Heather.
the people you care for and the program you run. What do you derive from this? What does this touch in you?
Yeah, I think for me it comes down to some really simple concepts. What's a life worth? How do we value dignity at the end of life? Is it the same for everyone? Unfortunately, for folks like Terry, the first patient that I ever dealt with, I started to realize that it's quite obvious that the homeless and vulnerably housed live difficult lives. But should they really die differently? I'd like to think we live in a society where everybody has the opportunity to die in an equitable fashion. And to me, that represents a just society. And so that's really what it means to me.
You know, we don't even have this discussion adequately around palliative care and dying
Right.
in society more broadly,
That's
let
right.
alone this kind of specific required discussion of palliative care for the homeless. But it's an important one that you've sparked, and we'll look forward to Cass's reporting today. Wonderful to meet you, to
Thank
find
you.
out about the worthwhile work you're doing. And again, if you want to find out more, Cass Russi on The World at 6 on CBC Radio, and online later this morning, an article on Dr. Dasani's program. You can find it at cbcnews.ca. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.